My name is Ben Green. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a community organizer, a trans man, and author. I write the Substack Good Queer News, where I talk about how and why to be hopeful. My wife slash lighting staff has just made it lighter in here. Thank you for that. Nice. There's the daytime. Really excited to be here. I do a lot of work in working with parents of trans folks and trans kids, do a lot of work at the Missouri State Capitol. I actually just moved out of Missouri when my wife started a residency at Children's Hospital of Orange County. So I'm moving all around. If you're a trans person in Orange County, be my friend. And we're going to be talking a whole lot about coming out this evening. So I figured that I should share some of my own moments and stories from coming out to just kind of kick us off. And while I do that, I would love it if y'all would share in the chat if there's somebody specific you have in mind that you want to come out to. Because I don't just do these talks because I want to hear the sound of my own voice. I do this to help all of you who took the time out of your evening to spend some time with me today. So please feel free to let me know in the chat if you are comfortable doing so. Are you trying to come out to family, to a partner, to community? And I will kind of make sure that my talk fits what people are really focusing on. So just a funny story I like to start out with about coming out. I want to tell the story of when I came out publicly on Facebook. I was 15 years old. This was a decade ago, and I decided to come out on Facebook because I had no idea how anybody was going to react. And I said, all right, Facebook, at least it's got that little bit of a layer of safety there. And so I made my post, and in general, it was a fairly positive response, but there was one very interesting reaction, which was somebody from my school who commented on my post 5 times in a row saying, "Call me." And I was like, okay, I have to know what this is about. So I sent him a message. I said, "Hey, Charlie, what's going on?" And he jumped right in. He said, "I'm very confused." And I said, okay, I get it. This is really new and unfamiliar for a lot of people. I'm not going to judge you for that. Do you have something you're confused about or a question I can answer? Help me help you. And he said, "I just don't understand. How is your hair so short?" And I was like, wait, what? I get that there's a lot about this that's very unfamiliar. Have you heard about haircuts? And he said, "But it looks like a boy's hair." And I said, well, yeah, I went down to the barber shop and I said, "Hello, one men's haircut, please." And then I gave them my money in exchange for goods and services, because that's how this whole thing works. And they gave me my men's haircut. And he said, "Well, I think that's weird. Be who you were born." And I said, in a roundabout sort of way, "That's actually very supportive. Thank you." And ultimately, we realized that he's trying to antagonize me, and I'm having way too much fun for that to work. And I'm trying to educate him, and he is too scared or insecure or what have you for that to work. So we ended our conversation and went our separate ways. And now I really like to tell that story. I tell that story to introduce almost every single presentation I give. And I've been public speaking for 7 years at this point. Every speech I give for the past 7 years has started with that story for a variety of reasons. It makes people feel more comfortable. It takes some of the pressure off. In this context, I think it shows something that is important for us all to remember as we're going into coming out, which is that very few people are going to have a perfect reaction, are going to have an immediate, "I understand everything and I love you completely and I'm doing everything right as an ally." That's unlikely to happen. They might bumble over their words. They might say the totally wrong thing, meaning well, or they might not mean well, right? That story that I told that I think is pretty funny is just a story about cyberbullying. It is just a story about another kid from my school taking it upon himself to be cruel to me on one of the most frightening days of my life. That wasn't a good day, but that's not the story that I choose to tell about how my coming out went. I don't let him define my story or what my experience was. I have found opportunities to laugh at all the ridiculous responses I've gotten and ways to just not make key details of my story the people who chose not to love me or see me or accept me. So as we are going into this conversation, I want us to hold that even, to put my woo-woo tinfoil hat on for a second, reality is subjective. It is whatever you decide to focus on, however you decide to interpret the things that happen to you. If you want to, interpret responses as immediate unsupport and this is really terrible, you can choose to do that. Or if you want to laugh at a response that's a little bit ridiculous because they don't get any of the language right, or you want to smile that somebody is making an effort, even if they're not doing a super great job, we have to choose what we want to look for. So I like to tell that story. Now let me do a quick check of the chat to see what folks are sharing. A lot of immediate family, new friends, workplace and grandparents, trying to figure out how to tell my mom. Yeah. Okay, we've got a lot of combination between work and family. So let's jump in. Let me pull up these little slidey guys that I have going on here. Can you all see these okay? No, that looks like it's blank. How about now? Is this better?
Looks good to me.
Perfect. Excellent. Oops. Okay, so strategies for coming out. Our agenda for this evening, we're going to talk about reframing coming out, as in some affirmations and why we feel we want to come out. We're going to talk about how we can test the waters and see what the vibe is in a situation and the different formats of coming out, the benefits of each of those formats. We'll talk about how to plan a coming out conversation or message and how to keep our safety in mind. And then we'll have an opportunity for practice or questions or whatever else is on your mind and on your heart. So, my introduction, I think we've already kind of gone over that. I wrote a book for parents of trans kids and write a Substack called Good Queer News where I talk a lot about hope. I spent 5 years up until about a month ago as a community organizer in Missouri, and I do a lot of work with PFLAG. And one of the things that I think I can bring to this conversation, in particular because of my work with PFLAG, is an understanding of the incredibly broad range of first reactions compared to like endpoints of allyship. I spend so much time. I've spoken to over 100 PFLAG chapters across the country, all for free. And so many of them are just full of parents who said, yeah, I said something really embarrassing when my kid came out. I know that I really hurt my kid and I'm looking to heal that relationship. So many really beautiful stories of people constantly trying to learn and grow and get better. And you're going to notice that's a theme throughout the evening is me reminding all of us that first reactions are not where people are always going to end up. So that's a little bit about me and the work that I do. I want to start by talking a little bit about the concept of coming out. Where did it come from and why do we feel an attachment to it? Coming out is not when your journey begins. So somebody who says, well, I haven't come out yet, so, I'm not really trans, I'm not really queer because I haven't told anybody yet. Your journey is about you only. As soon as you come out to yourself, that is the only thing that matters. You do not need to be public in order to be actually trans, actually gay, actually queer. You set that timeline for yourself. It is also not a requirement for honesty in your relationships. You do not have to start every conversation by saying, hey, just so you know, I'm transgender, right? There are so many ways to think of our transness. It is pieces of our medical history, the story of our body, the challenges we've gone through. And however you want to categorize transness, queerness, and gender fluidity and gender creativity, there are going to be other things that fit in that bucket. None of those other things are requirements that we share with people. I do not need to tell people that I had Kawasaki's disease when I was 3. They don't need to know that piece of my medical information. I don't need to trauma dump on everyone I met. They don't need to know all of the hard things I've gone through outside of my transition. I don't need people to know about the facets of how I define my racial identity or my religious identity, right? We understand that lots of things are allowed to be personal, private information for a variety of reasons. And I'm not lying to someone if they don't know how many siblings I have. You're not lying to someone if you're not coming out immediately. It's not also not the only way to be really queer or trans. As I said before, you do not have to come out to be valid in your identity, and it's not up to someone else. It is up to you. You get to decide when you would like to come out and if that feels empowering for you. So what coming out is an act of trust in a friendship or a relationship. This is something that I spend a lot of time working with parents on understanding that someone coming out to you is a profound gift that they have decided that you are worth telling, that you are worth trusting. That is miraculous to be worthy of that trust. To me, I feel like I'm giving someone a real gift when I'm coming out, not just because I am validating that I see them as a safe, trustworthy, or worthwhile person, but also because I'm making their life more interesting. I think that trans and queer folks create freedom that then so many other people gain access to when they come to know us and love us and support us. They say, well, if I want to be a good ally, maybe I can paint my nails because it'll help my trans friend feel more comfortable. And now I have a little bit more of an access to freedom in the world around me. So coming out is a way that we choose to write our own stories. It is our choice only and always. I know there are moments where it might come out of our control, and that is really challenging. But I want us to understand that theoretically and in practice and in an ideal world, coming out should only ever be up to us. Our choice, our autonomy. So I want to go over some affirmations and some reminders. First affirmation, identities can change and you aren't a failure if you come out multiple times. You are an art project, not a science experiment. You are not waiting for the one definitive answer that you will find out through projects. You are constantly creating yourself. There will always be new things to help you be even more beautiful, even if those things are totally different or totally opposite than what they were before. It is not a bad thing to come out multiple times. And if you're feeling uncertain and there are people that you trust to be able to go along with that journey, or with you for that journey, that's amazing. As I've mentioned many times before, your validity is not defined by your outness. Our queerness makes the world better for everyone. When I come out to somebody in my heart, I say you're welcome. Your world just got more interesting. You just became a better advocate, a better ally for all the trans people you're going to meet because now you've met a trans person. I know that I'm giving a gift to the trans kids who are in the world around me. I view my transness as something beautiful that the people around me should be so lucky as to get to experience the insights that I bring, the kind of person that I am. And I hope that we can all learn to embrace something akin to that spirit. Maybe you don't have the exact same attitude about it as I do. That's okay. You get to have your own experience of your identity. But know that your identity is not an imposition on someone, is not making someone's life more difficult. It's going to feel uncomfortable when your world cracks in half in order to understand that it was never so small in the first place. But our existence as trans people inherently is going to crack that little bubble open. And that might be uncomfortable for someone, but that is not you doing something wrong. That is you welcoming them in to a much more beautiful, colorful world. One of my favorite statistics about trans inclusion is that more people say they've met a ghost than say they've met a transgender person. That means that a lot of people are kind of set up to fail, right? Most people are not ignorant because they're hateful. Most people out there in the regular world are ignorant because they've been failed by the media, by the education system, by all the people who conspired to make sure they never learned what a transgender person is. So a lot of people are experiencing a profound amount of misinformation that's made to look true or just never hearing about this before. So there are plenty of reasons why someone might not have a perfect first response, but that does not mean they never will. My grandmother took 8 years to call me Ben for the first time. She is a Roman Catholic living in rural North Carolina, so I did not have high hopes, but slowly over time, with conversations with me, with conversations from my other family members, she was able to understand that, hey, I thought this was going to be a phase, but as she said to me, you're just so much happier now. So I guess we're going along with this because it makes sense. The last reminder I'll give to give people room to surprise you and don't let perfect be the enemy of progress. If we expect a perfect response, we're going to be really hurt by anything less than that. So setting a bar of when I go into this conversation, my goal is just that I want this person to see me. I want to know that they still love me. You get to decide where your bar is. If you want to set a higher bar than me, that's okay. But know that sometimes if you set your bar too high, you're going to feel hurt by that. So set a bar that feels realistic and doable with the radical acceptance of the world we're in, and then we can work up from there. We can find progress as we keep moving along together. So let's talk about testing the waters. How can we figure out who is a safe person to come out to? First thing to do is to suggest they attend an educational event with you. This is a perfect opportunity for Pride Month because there are often webinars, author talks at the library or the History Museum, things that provide an entry point into talking about the LGBTQ community. I really like either doing that or watching like a TV show or something versus just going to something like a Pride parade because it gives you something really tangible to ask about of like, hey, we attended this event about, LGBT history in our city. I was really surprised by some of those facts. What do you think about what we learned today? It gives them something bigger to react to versus just saying, how do you feel about transgender people? I think that is a really hard question to ask. And for me, I know was a failure strategy, right? I asked how my parents felt about Caitlyn Jenner in 2015. No one liked Caitlyn Jenner in 2015. There are a lot of reasons for that, but I was 15 and did not understand that. I just asked about an incredibly controversial and before her transition, also not well liked public figure that my family they just kind of made fun of her. They were pretty disrespectful because they didn't like her as a person, and I took that to mean they didn't like her as a trans person. So, thinking about where we are today versus where we are then, there are a lot of big political like boogeymen about the trans community, whether it's athletes or kids in gender affirming care. If you are not a kid seeking gender affirming care or a trans athlete, we don't want to start there and ask, how do you feel about transgender people? Because they are currently a subject of the misinformation machine. So we want to give them something more specific to react to and something more human to react to. So if we don't want to go to an educational event or they're not interested in a TV show, we could bring up a queer friend or a person that you respect or make up a guy, as they like to say. So saying something like, oh, someone at work started using they, them pronouns recently. Took me a little getting used to, but they're pretty cool. Have you met anyone who uses they, them before? So again, avoiding just saying, what do you think of transgender people? Because you're asking how they feel about the monolith, which is not helpful. We're trying to get them to connect the idea of transgender people to a person, to a story, to a face. If you have somebody that they know who is trans, like we don't want to out anybody, but if you had a childhood friend who transitioned, who's unlikely to see this person again, so it's not a big deal that you're sharing their story or you know that they're publicly out. You could say, hey, remember that person from growing up? He transitioned a few years ago and I just, learned about it on social media. I thought that was pretty cool. He seems really happy now. Sharing that little bit of a story to get their reaction might be more helpful than just going in to ask about the monolith. We can also look for an inside informant. Who can I send in? Who can I send on an inside job to talk to this person? Whether I'm at work and I have a supportive coworker, or I can talk to HR and know that I trust my HR person to use their discretion to figure out how that's going to go in the workplace. Maybe I talked to a sibling of a parent. I came out to my aunt before I came out to my parents and said, hey, do you think they'd be supportive? And she said, oh, well, you don't know this because he lives very far away, but we have a cousin who's gay and your dad was always super supportive. So who can we send in? Who can we send onto the inside that can do a little bit of assessing for us and that we trust to be subtle, right? I've got plenty of people that I could ask to do that and would do a terrible job. So I also want to give a really important caveat, which is that all of these things are neither a guarantee that someone will be supportive or that they won't be supportive. Sometimes people are stupid and thoughtless, and they say careless things when they don't think anyone is listening, whether they're trying to be funny, especially if you're talking to be very blunt here, if you're talking to men, sometimes men, dads, uncles, grandpas love to kind of gruff it up and just say, oh, we're talking about trans people. I'm going to be a cool guy and I'm going to talk some shit about this community because of toxic masculinity or what have you. So sometimes people are less kind than they would be interpersonally when they think no one is listening. Other times, people are really supportive generally, but the idea that their own child, their own family member would be trans is much scarier for them. So I cannot make any promises about how someone is going to respond, either positive or negative, but recognizing that people all have the ability to surprise us. And hopefully, this is mostly going to apply to people who we assume are not going to be that supportive and end up going on a journey to learn how to support us. That is usually what I see. But I want to make sure that I don't promise you all that someone's going to respond really well just because you watch, Pose or something together. So there are a couple of different formats for coming out. And it used to be a thing that people would feel very entitled to a live conversation. Right? That's kind of the gold standard of delivering serious messages as an in-person conversation. And it's a thing to say, oh my God, he broke up with you over text. I can't believe he'd do that. Right? We have this attachment to a tier system of how meaningful a conversation format is. And I want us to break away from that, especially as we're looking at different views of who is and isn't more likely to be a safe person for us to come out to. There are different formats that are going to be supportive in different ways. So a live conversation, obviously there's a lot of things that are great about that. In particular, the ability to read and send body language and tone, as well as the ability to hug. I think that that's such a undervalued, amazing way. Maybe not undervalued because I think most people like hugs, but a lot of times, especially parents or people who are really new to learning about the trans community, they don't have words. They do not know how to say the right thing. All they know how to communicate is, I need you to know that I love you. And a hug can be a really good way to do that. So live conversations are great when you feel more confident that somebody's going to be a safe person, or when you want to have the ability to read their body language and see what they've got going on there. Next level down with one additional barrier of safety is a phone call or a FaceTime. So it has a lot of those same body language and tone things, but it gives you the flexibility either to say, like, okay, I'm going to do a phone call and I'm going to have my partner or my best friend sit in the room with me and hold my hand, or I'm going to wear my most comfortable pajamas, or like for me, I really like to have difficult conversations on a walk in the park. So I'll put in my headphones and I'll call somebody while I'm walking around in nature. That helps me feel really grounded. So it gives you an easier pathway to say, why don't we take a break? Let's talk again later. Close the conversation. Next level with a little more distance, we have an email or a letter. So this is still a little bit more formal than a text or a DM that presses the importance of a message, right? When somebody writes you a letter, you know that there's probably going to be something like a little bit serious going on in there. What I really like about emails and letters is it gives people time for a private reaction before they talk to you about what they've read. So there are certain people, right? As you learn the people in your family and your community, you can learn how they react to highly stressful situations. Some people have really big emotional reactions, and then after an hour are like, okay, like, thank you, I needed to get that out of my system, I'm fine now. Some people really shut down, and like my mom needs to research. She does not really like to say anything, or she says things that are very interesting choices. And then she goes and does hours of research and she comes back and then she's like, got it, she's good. But she needs to go into her cave and research before she's going to say the right thing at all. So what that provides is a private reaction that you don't have to hold, you don't have to carry, right? If I know that somebody's going to have a really dramatic first reaction, maybe I don't want to have to envision that every time when I think about our relationship. I always have to wonder, do you still think that thing about me? Does any part of you still believe the questions you asked when I first came out? So it provides that extra little bit of a layer of distance. That's not necessarily a distance in respect or trust, but it might just be that it's a lot less emotionally taxing. If you're somebody who has a really hard time getting words out when you're in a stressful conversation, or you're worried they're not going to let you finish, you can write it all out and make sure that they have the best shot at reading everything you've wrote. This is also a really helpful method for coming out at work. Email, whether it's we're sending an email to HR and setting up a time for a meeting, or we're meeting with HR, coming up with a plan, and then sending out an email to your colleagues so that they can react privately and then come and see you the next day or the next week. We also have text message and DM as an option that is obviously more casual, which isn't a bad thing, right? Sometimes we use text message or DM because it seems like it's not a big deal to us, so it's not a big deal to the person that we're talking to either. We just say, yeah, this is not an issue. This is casual. By the way, I'm going to try out using he or they pronouns now. And generally, I would say this lands the best with Gen Z and millennials. Gen X and baby boomers aren't as familiar. This is a general statement. I'm certain there are people in all categories who, totally blow this up. But in general, people who are Gen X and baby boomers didn't spend as much time using text to have a conversation. It was a way to relay information quickly before you had a phone call or met up somewhere. So that may not be as well received, or they might just be confused about it. So lots of different options for how you want to come out. And there are other things that we can keep in mind and consider as we're getting ready for those coming out conversations. Location, if it's in person. Do we want to have this in public or in private? If I have a little bit of a safety concern about somebody, or I think they're going to make a really big scene, maybe I come out in a coffee shop because I know they're going to have to be on their best behavior. Is there a location that's really special to both of you that you could use to remind them of how, meaningful your relationship is? Do you know where the exits are? Do you know how to leave that situation? So that is both literally, do you know where the different doors that you can leave out of are, as well as do you know what your plan is? Do you have a friend who's ready to pick you up? Do you have somewhere that you know you can go to spend a couple hours or a night or two if you need to, if you're looking for a safe place? Next, we have timing. Do we want to tell the person in advance that we want to have a conversation, right? Do we want to schedule something? When do we think they're most likely to be receptive to this information? So if there's somebody who is working 14-hour shifts at the hospital right after work, is probably not going to be the best time to have that conversation. Maybe we wait until they have a day off or until they're in a really good mood. Some people also really like to have conversations in time-limited spaces, like a restaurant where you're going to need to leave, a car ride. Car rides are, if anyone has seen Fun Home, an excellent space to have a coming out conversation because you don't have to make eye contact, which there's something really nice and kind of taking the pressure off about that, and it's time limited. You're going somewhere, and then you can get somewhere and say, well, I'm going to get out of the car now. So there's some people really like to have a short, time-limited conversation versus, I know we could talk about this all night. I want you to ask all your questions. We also can think about who we want to bring. We do not have to come out by ourselves. Do you want to have a supportive parent come with you to talk to extended family? Do you want to have a partner or a friend come to just be emotional support or have your back? Do you want to have a therapist or support resource or like a mediator of some kind, right? If you're coming out to your manager, can HR be there? Or if you're coming out to HR, can a trusted coworker or your manager be there? If you are, for me, there were certain members of my family that I knew their first reaction was not going to be good. So I asked my parents to go and have that first conversation with them. And then I would come in and answer questions in a day or two. So that gave them the ability to get it off their chest without me having to carry that, especially as a kid. But even as an adult, there's something nice about having that layer of protection through activating my allies. So I want to do a quick pause and check in because I know I've thrown a lot at you so far about litmus testing, safety, planning, all that stuff. How are we feeling? Any thoughts, reactions, questions so far? Giving myself time to drink some of my Olipop for my stomach. Transgender IBS, you know how it is. Okay. Wonderful. I'm not seeing anything in the chat and Q&A, so I'm going to keep going. Thank you, B. So far, so good. I love the validation. Okay, so planning, resources, and safety. What can you include in your message? Notice I have heavily highlighted, well, not heavily, I have emphasized the word can because there is no should here. There is no information that says you have to say this if you are going to come out. I want to just check that message really quickly. My biggest fear is it's not going to matter what I say or if I'm happier. They're extremely religious and won't accept it. That is really challenging. And I'm going to share a couple of resources that might be helpful in a slide or two. I wish I had an easy answer. Sometimes there are people that are not interested in getting through. I really hope that's not the case. I can't make any promises either way. I know a lot of really religious people who have had to go on a journey to learn how to love their kid. And I know people who haven't chosen to go on that journey. It's a really challenging situation. So let me talk in a little bit about a couple of resources that might be helpful. Hopefully they will be able to learn. I'm rooting for them. So as you are coming out, what can you include if you would like to, if it would be empowering for you? We want to set them up for success, so we want to include a definition of the label that you're using and a personal example of what that means to you. So I wanted to tell you I'm transgender. That means that I identify as a boy. I feel, for me, like I was supposed to be born with the body of a boy. The parts of my body that, people look at and say, girl, just do not feel right for me. And I really wish that people saw me as a boy. And that's what transgender man means to me. Sharing a little bit of giving them the language to be a part of the conversation. If you want to, you can share a little bit of the story of how you learned this about yourself. You don't have to, but you can. This one is annoying, but is important, which is a reminder that you're still the person they've always known. For some reason, this continues to be a real sticking point, especially for parents and family members or people who have known us for a long time. So reminding them, we're still going to have this tradition together. We're still going to have this in common. I'm still going to want to be your friend. right? Helping my mom understand that even though we no longer had a mother-daughter relationship, we could have an even stronger mother-son relationship now that I had seen her choose to show up for me when she didn't have to. So that reminder is annoying and can be helpful. We also could consider sharing requests for what our family member or friend or ally can do to support us. Depending on what their reaction is, we might want to start small. A lot of times people have this feeling of like, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do, I care, I want to show up, but I don't even know what that would begin to look like. So to say, could you help me, go shop for a new shirt? Do you want to come with me to get my hair cut? Could you help me communicate with this other person? Do you want to help me try out a few new names? Whatever it is, inviting people not only to support you, but to be a part of the journey can feel, exciting for them to no longer feel like I'm kind of having this thrust upon me, but to feel like they're a part of the journey. For some people, helps them get on board a little bit more quickly. We also, if we want to, can share an opportunity to ask questions or a really clear boundary, especially if we're coming out at work. We can say, at this point, people at work might ask about surgery, which for HR people is always a well-intentioned, terribly executed way of saying, are you going to need time off, right? They've got their HR brain going 100% of the time. So with some people, it's okay to be offended if they ask about surgery right away. With HR people, that's information that they want to know so that they can check your benefits, so that they can get that time off for you. But set that boundary. Say, hey, here are the things that I'm going to be seeking time off for. And besides that, I'd appreciate if you could help me, prevent any questions about my body or about my genitals. Or, please feel free to ask me questions. I'm happy to be a resource. Everybody gets to decide what questions they're willing to accept. So letting folks know what is and is not acceptable for you. And then we want to share some resources or some places to go to learn more. And in a minute, I'll share what some of those resources are. But first, I want to share a little bit of my soapbox rant on a phrase that has become very popular in these early coming out conversations, which is Google is free. Google is not free, it's broken. Google hasn't worked as intended for many years now. It is an expression that people love to throw out whenever somebody asks a question. Google is free, educate yourself. If you couldn't tell by now, I get really fired up about that phrase because I think it does so much more harm than good. We are not going to get to a more inclusive or liberated world by telling people, I don't owe you anything. Google is free. That's not going to help us. Google is all far-right advertising, AI-generated nonsense, or nonprofits that are just posting big pieces about suicide statistics and fundraising for new allies, especially parents who are like kind of freaking out, but also a lot of people. Google is not a functional tool. And every couple of months, I like to humble myself and put into Google, like, my child is transgender, and look and see how different all the different results are, how many sponsored results there are. It's not good. It is not helpful in those circumstances. So a reminder that is important but uncomfortable is that organizations on the far right, people like Moms for Liberty, the gender critical people, they are incredibly welcoming. No matter what your language is, no matter how frightened you are, they are very, very warm. And we do not want to tell someone, I'm not answering your questions. I don't care, because they're freaking out. They're going to go to Google to try to find somebody who will say, I'm not mad at you. I see you. I'm here. Let's talk about it. And the people who are doing that are the far right. So I'm not saying that it is our fault for moving people to the far right, but we want to make sure that we are not being so hostile towards the people who want to support us that they go and find the welcoming communities within the far right. Notably, this is not me saying that you should just accept being uncomfortable, you should answer every question, how dare you lay down a boundary. That is not what I'm saying either. But there is a middle ground here where we can create what I like to call a no list. What is your list of your favorite trusted resources that you can give to somebody that you could, like, I have a notes app on my phone of my 5 personal favorite no resources that I don't want to answer a question. I say, I'm so sorry, I've got a flight to catch. Here is my list of resources that I think would be great. Because I'm not going to tell them to Google it and hope that they find these resources that I really like. I want to set them up to succeed and then tell them to put the effort in themselves. So come up with your list so that you can say no without saying, I can't believe you would ever try to learn and ask me this question. Just go and figure it out yourself in, a library where the books are in order by number of pages, right? We want to help set people up to have the best chance possible as learning to support us and stand with us. So what are some of those good resources that are great to share? There's no specific resources that I want to list out right now because so many of us have so many different identities that we're representing here, and you really want to share things that reflect as close to your personal experience as you can. You want to use a variety of mediums and lengths where you can so that people have different options to engage. So I try really hard to share both a documentary and a short video, or a book and an article, or like a long podcast and a short podcast, so that people can find however their learning style is, they can engage in that way. Maybe it's fiction and nonfiction combined. I always like to have a fiction resource, some narrative storytelling, because people are really curious. They want to know, wow, what happened? What did you experience? What have you gone through? And we don't always want to be cracking open our chests and showing people all the challenging things we've experienced. But some people have used art to create that. So how can I show them? Well, I don't really want to share that, but read the book Cemetery Boys. I really like the journey of masculinity that the main character goes on. We also want to find resources with as much demographic overlap as possible. This is especially helpful with people who are older, who are really specific in their beliefs, or who just have this feeling of, well, transitioning is only for X group of people. It's only for X age, only for X race, etc. People don't do that within Catholicism or within our, nationality, what have you. There are queer and trans resources and people across every demographic and every group of people. There have been and always will be trans and queer people. So finding those resources, or at least those singular stories to be able to share, can be extra meaningful. And for faith-related resources in particular, there is an organization called the Strong Family Alliance that has a compilation of every religiously oriented LGBT support organization. They have organizations for every possible faith denomination, even ones that people would look at and say, there is no way that, the Southern Baptists are showing up to support their LGBTQ loved ones. But there's an organization of Southern Baptists and of Lutherans and all people learning how to show up. So finding those organizations and those resources, both written, filmed, and live, are great to share. And then we want to step that up to provide maybe some local resources or support groups. So PFLAG has over 400 chapters around the country. It used to stand for Parents and Family of Lesbians and Gays. They're not using the acronym anymore. It is mostly Parents and Family and Friends and Communities of Trans Folks. And maybe you offer to go with somebody to say, hey, I'd love to attend this meeting. Would you be willing to come with me to help make that feel a little less scary? Or you could say, hey, my doctor is willing to answer your questions. When I started testosterone, my doctor got on the phone with my parents for an hour for free. She did not have to do that, but she knew that they had a lot of questions. They were really nervous. I was 21, by the way. They weren't required to be a part of that process, but I wanted them to be, and they were nervous. And so she met with them and answered all of their questions. So what allies do you have in your life that can answer questions for you that we can share as a resource? We also deserve some of our own resources. Coming out is hard. It is frightening. It is emotionally taxing. It's tiring. We need to decompress and come down after those conversations too. So we want to plan some things to look forward to, whether it is having a massage scheduled, or going to a rage room where you can break a bunch of plates, or going to a workout class where you can burn off some energy, whatever it is, scheduling something to help you decompress right away afterwards, or going for a walk, whether it's by yourself or with your dog or with a loved one, or even with the person you've just come out to. Just finding an opportunity to get out in nature and get moving helps us slow down, take a breath, start to regulate ourselves again. We can also spend time in places that make us feel seen, right? Coming out is hard because the conversation is essentially, hey, here's something you didn't know about me. I hope you can see me. That is the underlying message behind coming out, is I hope you can see me. So we want to go places where we know that that's not up for debate. I know in my local queer affirming bookstore that has a whole LGBT science fiction section, I know I can spend 45 minutes there and feel a little bit calmer afterwards. Or go to the LGBT community center where everybody's going to be getting my pronouns right. Spending time with a friend on the phone, or just reading a queer book with queer characters living their best lives and all having their genders affirmed by the people around them. I love to have that as a resource for myself after these challenging conversations. So you need resources and support too. So I want to give us an opportunity to practice now. I know there's only about 27 of us here, and then we're going to use the remainder of our time for Q&A. If you want to take a second in this supportive environment, being mindful of what doors and windows and physical spaces you're in, sometimes the scariest thing is just saying the words, is saying, my name is Ben and I am transgender. So I want to give you a second if you would like to share that with the computer. I know it's a webinar, so I can't hear you. But if you want to say it, I support you. I'll do it on the count of three. And if you want to share that, please feel free to do so. One, three, I'm transgender. And if you did say it, I want you to know that I'm glad you did. I'm proud of you. I see you. I love you for it. Thank you for sharing that. So at this point, I'm going to open the floor to anybody who would like to ask questions. We've got a couple questions in the Q&A already. I'll also put my contact information up here on the screen if anyone would like to talk about any other resources, how to get involved in advocacy, or anything else. But now let me jump into the Q&A and just say thank you all for spending an evening with me. This has been really lovely.
Yes, and thank you so much, Ben, for sharing all of these resources and just like your knowledge and wisdom as always. And yeah, thank you for asking folks to verbalize that out loud or even just in the chat. Like, thank you, Jeffrey, for sharing that. Thank you, B.
Yeah,
We have a question in the chat. Do you mind if I share that with you?
go for it.
This person says, as an older transitioner married with adult children, is there any advice, especially regarding the feelings of guilt of having misled them for many years?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, it's hard. I get it. And thank you for pulling that slide down. It's challenging, and there's not going to be a perfect answer. But I think one of the biggest things to understand is that even if that's something that you wondered about yourself or weren't ready to share with the world, but always knew, or have just figured out about yourself, you have not done something wrong by not telling them that yet. Maybe the world wasn't ready to share it. Maybe you weren't ready to share it. But coming out is for you and you alone. It is not something you owe to people. It is not something you are misleading them about. Even if you weren't telling them, even if you were actively telling them other things to kind of cover that up, you've got to move on your own timeline. That is such an important piece of this whole journey that we're on, is that it is your journey. Yes, they are going to go on other journeys alongside you that might be parallel, that might be intersecting. I don't know what their journeys are going to look like. And I can't even necessarily promise they're going to understand this. People have lots of complicated emotions, but you did not do something wrong by not feeling ready to come out yet, for whatever that reason might have been. I think the biggest thing I might recommend is connecting with as many other people as you can who also came out and transitioned late in life, to find other people who have worked through similar feelings and not feel, like I'm alone in this or like I'm the first person who's felt this way. I have talked to a lot of people who have felt that way, and there's not going to be a perfect answer. I think it's just that it's not that you've been lying to them your whole life. You are stepping into a new truth now. Even if it might have been true the whole time, you are stepping into it in a new way. You're welcoming them in on that journey. You have not been misleading them. But I know that's easier for me to say than it is for you to know. So I hope that you're connecting with some community resources that can help you feel that truth too.
Amazing. Thank you. Another question came in. It says, what can I do for myself if I have to live with people who are openly transphobic? I am worried about them attacking my emotional health.
Yeah, that is really hard. I wish I had an easy answer for that. I would say where you can, maybe look for resources into how we can make that have some kind of end date that you know for yourself. Maybe you say, all right, I understand that I can't be who I want to be in this household, but at this time, I get to start making this plan for how I'm going to get out of this environment. And there are a lot of organizations that provide either micro grants or loans to help trans and queer folks get into safer housing and living situations. Queer exchange Facebook groups in different metropolitan areas are also great for finding safe roommates, affirming places to be. So I would say where you can, finding little ways to feel seen in your space, right? Maybe you can't hang up a pride flag. Maybe you can get or you can get something that's not even stereotypically trans, but that you can decide, okay, I'm hanging up this picture of a leaf and I'm deciding for me that the leaf is a trans pride flag because the leaf always changes color in the cycle of life. And so when I see a leaf, I know that's my pride flag and I can have my pride themed room even if it's the flag that I created in my heart, right? What little ways can you find to feel seen in your space that keep you safe, knowing that out and proud might not be the answer if they're really openly hostile. You also can think about ways to incorporate, as silly as this may sound, ways to incorporate play into mental health. I know for me, there were a number of times where I was stealth, and there was about a year where I was not out to anybody around me except for one close friend. He didn't live in the same town as me, and I would go to like a family wedding, a gathering, and I would have to wear a dress, and it felt horrible. But he would be texting me as mission control, and I would be doing it in my brain too, of like, I'm an undercover agent. I need cross-gender, undercover gear. This is a tactical dress. This isn't a dysphoric outfit. This is helping me blend in to complete the mission. And I was like playing a game that helped me feel like I wasn't lying to myself. I was accomplishing a mission by staying safe and not coming out at that gathering. So maybe you find a way to either create a game or to have rituals of like, I close my door and I get to feel myself become someone else when I'm in this little safe space, right? What are the little ways you can find to make yourself feel seen when they don't want to do that? It might be something silly. Silly solutions can work too. It doesn't have to be serious to be meaningful. I love using play to help me with a lot of things. I use play to do my to-do list every day. So using play, making yourself feel seen, and finding other places to hang out. Maybe you have to live there, but you don't have to spend your day there. You can spend a lot of time going for walks outside. You can start volunteering more at a community garden or do your work at a library or what have you, but find other third spaces where you can spend some time so you don't have to be in that home as much.
Awesome, thank you. One question is, how do I handle the fear that I may be disowned or need to cut off my family after coming out?
Yeah, it is a really good question. What I'll say is that we have this tendency that's become truthfully very new. It's had a significant resurgence in the last 5 years of people jumping really quickly to, I need to cut off my family. I know more people who have cut off their families in the past 5 years than in all my other years as an advocate and an organizer. And that's in large part because the way that social media has been wiring our brains, I know this makes me sound a little bit tinfoil hatty, is to view people as on a very clear moral binary and a very permanent moral binary that someone responds good or bad. They're with me or against me. They're transphobic or they're a perfect ally. And so a lot of people have fallen into that. Like we spend a ton of time on social media having that belief reinforced that you are good or you are bad, you are canceled forever, or you are this amazing, perfect ally. And then when we go out and meet a human being who's messy, like all human beings are going to be, we don't know what bucket to put them in. And that discomfort is enough to say, okay, you are not using my pronouns. You don't understand. I need to cut you off. And that's really hard. Cutting off family is like anybody can make that choice. I'm not going to tell you what you can or can't do. For some people, that's the right answer. And people have the ability to grow and change, right? My parents didn't support me having surgery for the first 3 years. My nana, as I mentioned, took 8 years to call me Ben for the first time. And there were moments where I said, I don't know if I can continue this relationship. And so we talked about it. And slowly but surely, they were able to work their way towards something positive. And for the family members who didn't put in any effort, who didn't care, yeah, we don't have a particularly active relationship. Now, that fear of being disowned, I get that. I also, I don't know what your family circumstances are, but I will say that everybody who makes art about trans people, not everybody, mainstream Hollywood who makes art about trans people loves a trans sob story, right? They love making a story of a trans person getting kicked out of their house because the drama is so juicy. That is not the most common reaction to be having to a trans family member, to be completely disowned by your family, even if it's the most common story to hear on social media. On social media, in books, on TV, and in movies, it's that availability bias. The more we hear about it, the more likely we think it's going to be. I don't know your family. I'm not saying there's no way they'll kick you out. I don't know what your situation is, but I do think that we jump so quickly to the extremes that this is going to go as bad as possible. They are going to be as hateful as possible. They're never going to change. And that's a really hard place to start with our expectations set there. I think we want to try to set our expectations, doing those litmus tests, figuring out where they land, and then saying, okay, I expect that you're going to have some questions. I expect that, hopefully they're still going to want to learn how to love me, even if they're really confused, even if they don't want me to be trans at first. When you're starting from a place of love, parents can get really far. I've seen some unbelievable journeys that parents have been on in deciding I want to learn to be better for my kid. That includes leaving faith traditions, that includes switching faith traditions, leaning further into faith traditions that showed them how to be more supportive. There are so many things that families can be willing to do for their loved ones. Not always, can't make any promises. That's why we get to have our chosen families. We get to know that I'm surrounded by people who love me by choosing. I choose who I feel most loved by. And people can grow to learn to support us.
Thank you for the nuance, for sure. Another person said, I've been told that I should come out to my parents, but I already know that they wouldn't respond well. My father, especially, I don't feel unsafe, but I already hardly speak to them anymore for multiple reasons, and I'm afraid that they'll say something that will make me want to cut them off completely. How do I not completely abandon my relationship with my parents? Would it just be healthier to stop talking to them?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I want you to take a minute to think about your realistic worst case scenario because I don't know what position you're in, especially with parents and financial support. Like that's tricky waters that I don't want to tell someone, "Oh, just come out, it's going to be fine." I don't know if like you are financially dependent on them. I'm not going to tell you to risk burning that bridge. What I will say is to think about your realistic worst case scenario. Your realistic worst case scenario is they say something that makes you want to cut them off so you stop talking to them. In order to avoid the worst case scenario, we stop talking to them. Your worst case scenario is already true, right? If it's already not an amazing relationship for a variety of reasons, I kind of think you might as well say, let's see how this goes. I'm going to, this seems like an excellent candidate for an email or a letter to say you react on your own time. But to be really open, sometimes with parents, the wake up shock of like, I was afraid to tell you. I was considering not talking to you anymore because I was so certain that you would not still love me. Trying as much as we can to remove the politics from it, to not say, well, because you voted for this person, we don't want to prime them to think about how that's relevant. We want to say, I am your kid, and I was afraid to tell you this because, I want you to see me. And if you aren't willing to do that, that's okay. No need to respond if you would like to say something like that. Or let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to talk to you about it. Whatever boundaries you want to set. But I think if the worst case scenario is either way that you're not talking, you might as well if you have nothing to lose there. It's a hard situation, and I don't blame you for saying I don't want to put in the effort. But I do know plenty of parents who have been through that like real wake up call journey of realizing either because they've already been cut off from their kids and they want to learn how to come back from that. I've talked to quite a few parents who are trying to come back from being cut off from their kids and learning how to show up for them on their journeys, which again, I don't know all the dynamics there, but there is an opportunity for a wake up call. Can't promise they'll take it, but you can give them the opportunity to try if you want to.
Amazing. Thank you. This person asks, how can I give a follow-up opportunity for my loved ones to talk about or discuss my transition who may be having trouble adjusting to the recent change? I'm certain my parents and siblings have questions, but I have trouble bringing it up with them.
Hmm. That is a great question. If it's helpful, I don't like to be a sales guy, but I wrote this book about supporting a transgender child or family member that could be a great, like, hey, maybe I don't know how to answer your questions, but I just watched this webinar. Here's a book I think you guys might really like. Or you could go to them to say, hey, I've definitely been through similar things as you, where I have people in my family who I knew were nervous and weren't sure what they were allowed to ask. So having some topic that can be like a prompt to bring it up of, I was just watching this TV show that I found really informative. Have you had a chance to watch that yet? Or, hey, I noticed that you've been having a little bit of a hard time with my pronouns. Can I help you understand that more? What questions do you have? Or maybe you give them an opportunity to just tell them the door is open, right? Maybe you write them an email or a text that says, hey, I want to make sure that you know I'm happy to answer questions. Here are the kinds of questions I'm comfortable answering. Here are the kinds I'm not comfortable. And giving them a little bit of some rules to operate in might help them feel a little more comfortable too. But any of those formats we talked about for coming out could work in this conversation as well.
Sweet. And the last one that we have in the Q&A box says, how do you integrate the process of coming out with the increasing ability to quote unquote pass? Is it best to wait until you can comfortably live your new life as the other gender?
It's a good question. I think it really depends on what your goals are with your transition and what you want the role of your community to be, right? I wanted to come out because I wanted my family to come with me on the journey. And in many ways, especially because I was younger, I needed their help on the journey. I needed someone to drive with me to the mall to pick out boy clothes. I needed somebody to schedule my haircut appointment and come with me to that. I needed permission to get the medical care that I wanted. So, what do you want, and both what do you want and like what would be your dream, right? You don't have to go through this alone if you don't want to. If you want somebody to come with you to your first, nail salon appointment to get your nails done for the first time or to teach you how to shave, it can be really beautiful to have people along for the journey with you. And some people say, no, I'd like this to be a personal, private journey. And then I'll invite people in, once the journey is over. But transition, as it seems, I'm guessing that you're maybe a little earlier on your journey. It's not a staircase that you walk up where I complete this, and this, and then I'm done, and now I can just go and move forth as normal. Some people choose to live stealth. They do not want to come out to anyone around them, and that's your choice. Obviously, I'm obsessed with being transgender from the everything about me. And I'm a terrible liar. So I wasn't cut out to be stealth. But for some people, they find a lot of meaning in that. Okay, cool, go for it. But I would generally say that transition, if I haven't had every surgery, I'm not laying down on the middle of a staircase because I don't want to complete my journey. I am a work of art in progress all the time. I am always going to be on this journey learning new things about myself. So I came out to people when I was ready for them to be a part of that journey. Whether it's because I just wanted them to know about the work that I do, or because I needed their support for something, or just because it was relevant in conversation that there was a certain joke that I wasn't going to be able to make unless they knew that I used to be a woman. I'm either going to sound like a misogynist or you need to know that I'm transgender. So I work on, and to be clear, I'm not making misogynistic jokes. I'm a feminist. I'm a male ally. Sorry, I'm getting overtired now. So I come out to people for a variety of reasons that feel right for the where I am on the journey that I am on. So don't feel like you have to wait until you pass. Some people might respond better, but they also just might respond differently of then saying, wow, I never would have guessed. People love to say that to me now, which is like, okay, thank you, I guess. Like telling me I don't look transgender enough. Sorry that brown hair doesn't dye well, whatever it is. So people are always going to have something to say. You get to decide what you want the category of that something to be. But don't feel like you're not allowed to pass until you look or you're not allowed to come out unless you look a certain way. You could have long hair, a skirt, painted nails, and say I'm coming out as transmasculine. And your people, the best people around you, will be able to see you and walk with you. Some people are going to have things they need to get through to be able to really get it. But other people are going to be ready to walk right there with you.
Amazing. Okay, last question in the Q&A. Thanks, B, for submitting this. They said, I'm having FFS in a couple of months and I'm taking a few weeks off. Coworkers are incredibly supportive. They work with thousands of mostly older volunteers all over the country who already know that they're non-binary/trans, and I'm wondering the best way to let them know about this big change and what to say, if anything.
Yeah. So this is an example of something that you should only tell people if it's empowering for you, right? This is your personal medical history. The only reasons you need to tell people about a surgery that you are having, besides if they are of like, romantic or sexual partner or like another doctor that you have. You want to tell them because you need to request time off, because you need to request support, or because you want them to celebrate with you. If you want to share that because you know that they'll be really excited for you, you can say, hey, I'm so excited. I'm going to be taking time off for this. I can't wait to see you all when I've got my new face. Or like, I want to throw a little happy hour to celebrate, to do a face reveal at the office, right? If you want to do something fun to celebrate, you can do that. With the volunteers that you have, if you were going to have an appendectomy or going to have a knee replacement, you would not need to inform the volunteers that you were undergoing a surgical procedure. You don't need to inform them you're going to undergo FFS. If they notice, maybe they'll ask about it, maybe they won't. If you want to share because you want them to celebrate that with you, right? If you want to say, hey, I'm so excited to be back. Like, if you're really happy to share about that stuff, you can say, I just had the surgery and I am feeling the words I love to use are at home in my body. And like showing people some trans joy is a gift that I can give to other people. So if you want to give them that gift, you can. You do not owe them your surgical history. For any other surgery, you would not need to tell them that. It's only if it is nice for you. It is for you that you share that. Also, congrats on FFS. That's so exciting. Good luck. That's awesome.
Yes, congratulations. And thank you, Ben, for just a beautiful wrap up, a great way to kick off June, this Pride Month. I'm
Yes.
excited for everybody here whose first Pride Month and Pride season it is. That is the end of this event. Ben, would you like to share kind of the work that you do, slash any links that we could send folks in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of my favorite things that I like to get to do are my newsletter, Good Queer News, where I talk about joy and resilience on Substack. It's free. There is a paid tier that I believe for Plume members, there is a discount on that. There's also a discount for Plume members on signed copies of My Child is Trans Now What through Left Bank Books, my favorite queer bookstore. So that book is my baby and is a great resource. It is not just for, parent-child relationships, and it is not just for minors. It is for somebody that I love is trans. How can I show up for them? It's a great book to use to come out to people. And at my bookstore, we had actually created coming out boxes for the launch to send to people who had come out recently or were using the book to come out. A lot of my other work is just in advocacy and hope and joy and teaching people how to get involved in improving their communities and improving the world around them. So stay tuned on my Substack. I will probably be hosting a number of public events in the next couple of weeks about how to show up, how to get involved, how to find joy in the fight for trans rights. And that's kind of that's my jam. That's what I'm up to. Please feel free to reach out anytime. I am your trans older brother, and I am always thrilled to be a resource. And this has just been such a delight. Thank you so much for having me back, Rye. This was awesome.
Of course, it's really nice having you back. And yeah, thank you for everything. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Yes, amazing, Skylar. Skylar says, thank you so much. I feel more
Yes.
out now. Yes, absolutely. To just finish wrapping us up, as a reminder, this was recorded. So if you ever need to send this recording to somebody, let's say if it's someone that you're trying to come out to, or somebody who is trying to come out and is needing resources, I'll get that edited and sent out in a couple of days. We have a post-event survey. It is anonymous.
Yeah.
Feel free to give us any feedback. What went well? What could have gone better? What other events you'd like to see in the future? And yeah, this is really kicking off like a whole storm of different events happening this month. We have pretty much almost all of our events now public for the month of June. Scar care recovery, things around top surgeries,
Nice.
all surgeries, queerness as a superpower, name and gender marker change, makeup outside the binary, kink through a trans lens, striking class, easy tarot for self-care, zine making, a whole thing.